vi kör igång kvällen. Välkommen Thomas McEntee, modeorakel.
What I want to start with, we're here to talk about fashion and identity. But before that, what I want to do is talk to you a little bit about myself and why I'm up here. Because what I want to talk to you about this evening a lot comes from a perspective of places I've been, people that I've met, things that I've done that have all helped me to understand my own identity and understand the role that fashion plays in that identity. And it gives me the ability to speak to you about it slightly intelligently. But a little backstory. I was born on the West Coast in the US, obviously, and we moved immediately to Hawaii. So I grew up on an island, and it sounds fabulous and amazing, but trust me, you'll hear stories in a minute, it's not. But I grew up there since I was 13, and then we moved to Washington State, way up north, very, very different world. And it was a very small, small town that I grew up in. And, you know, when you're in your teenage years, it's very formidable. And so I think you can understand in a place here, it's quite small. I grew up in a place even smaller than this. So for me, the minute I turned 18, I packed my shit and I ran and I went straight to LA and thought, here's where I'm gonna make it. So I studied fashion, I studied art history and thought, I'm going to be this famous stylist, I'm gonna be fantastic. Didn't quite pan out the way I wanted. Yes, I did some things I wanted to do. I ended up working for NBC for a while as a costume designer for a television show. It all sounded fabulous, and my head got a little bit big, so I dropped out of school. I don't condone that, by the way, to anyone. But I did, and things didn't pan out. So I thought, okay, now I need a new challenge. So I picked up and I went to New York. New York, I got back in touch with my creativity and I started doing makeup. There I made a very good name for myself. I did everything I wanted to do in my career when it came to makeup. New York Fashion Week, you name it, I've done it. At the same time, I started working at a store, one of the most prolific men's fashion stores in the world. It's called Odin. And there I sort of regained this idea of what fashion is to me other than makeup and creativity. What does that mean to myself as a whole? And I realized I was really good at it. I turned around that business, and in 10 years, I stood in New York and thought, hell, I'm bored. I'm actually bored in New York City, of all places. And then I thought, what's next? Where do you go after you've lived in New York City and done everything you wanted? Well, the obvious choice is Sweden. Hello. People say you're crazy for moving to Sweden, but if you think about it from an outsider's perspective, the best fashion comes from Sweden. The best music comes from Sweden. Some of the best art comes from Sweden. Architecture, even social standings. Coming from where I come from, your social climate is amazing. So the draw to move here was undeniable. So I came here, one-way plane ticket, suitcase, nowhere to stay, don't know a single person, don't speak the language. What do? Showed up at Arlanda Airport. What do? I had to make it work. And I did. 7 years later, I have worked with some of the biggest music artists in makeup. I've had the privilege of working for two of the largest fashion companies in Sweden, and in the world, for that matter. I was at Gant for about 4 years, where at the end of my stay, I was the head of design, head of production, head of global sales, head of retail, all of it. And now I have the privilege to work for H&M, and I don't look like an H&M person. I didn't go to Handelshögskolan. I didn't do that. But I'm here and I'm responsible for the entire business. So for me, this gives meat a little bit into what I do. And so I guess in a way that almost makes me feel a bit justified to talk to you about this, but in the end, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. And when Ann-Louise asked me, let's talk about fashion identity, I thought, well, what the hell am I gonna say other than where I come from? And I realized the first question I need to ask myself, what is fashion to me? That is the most important. And instead of looking inward, I thought, let me just remove myself from that situation a little bit. Let me look at it from a logical standpoint, maybe from a business standpoint. Let me look at two people who I've gotten to know, who I've worked with quite closely, and let me ask questions about them. So I asked, what is music to Lykke Li? What is tennis to Serena Williams? All of these things, tennis, music, this is how we know their name. But is it who they are? That's only a mere portion of what they do. But for them, Fashion plays a different role because how they feel comfortable in who they are, how they express themselves outwardly away from the music world or from the sports industry, that is who they are. That is Likili, that is Serena Williams. It's not music, it's not tennis. It's how they feel about themselves, how they put themselves out there. And let's take Serena Williams, for example. She's extremely inspiring because this is Serena. This is a very different Serena than you see on a tennis court. Granted, this is a very glamorous version of this woman, but this is who she is. And this is extremely important to her, so important to her that she takes her passion for who she is and she brings it onto the court. She only plays in things that she has designed. This is how important her identity is to her. And for me, it made me realize the answer to this question. You cannot do what you love without being who you are. And so for me, when I ask that question, what is fashion to me? Fashion's who I am. Flat out, it may sound cliche, but it is who I am. It's what I do. It's what I present outwardly. It's who I am. But the question here is, how did you come to that conclusion? How did you come to the moment that you understand that this is how you identify? Well, I trace it back to when I was a kid, and I think of my sister. No, Madonna is not my sister. If she was, I would not be standing here today, I tell you that. Or maybe I would, who knows. No, my sister is amazing. She inspired me so much when I was a kid. She was rebellious. She was cool. Everybody knew her name. And one of her biggest inspirations were people like Madonna, Boy George, George Michael, all of these people whose differences were being celebrated. I wasn't that kid. I was the kid that was getting teased. I was the kid getting beat up. I was a kid in the corner. I had no one to talk to. But I wanted to be my sister. I wanted to be that person. I wanted to understand, why am I different? Why does nobody like me? I would go into my sister's room and look at posters like this and feel empowered and feel like I could do this. This woman, these men, these people are different. They look different. They're inspiring a nation. They're inspiring the world. Everyone dressed like her. Everyone in the 80s. You cannot show me someone that did not want to be Madonna in the 80s. Either you loved her or you hated her. Regardless, she inspired you, negative or not. So for me, all of a sudden, I could feel good about being different. But at the same time, something happened when we're talking about the 80s and feeling good and understanding how to identify and understanding really what that word meant, identity. 5, 6 years old, I don't know what that means, but I knew that I would come to. And something happened to help me even take that step a bit farther. You can laugh all you want. MTV changed how we see the world. It changed how we identified with ourselves. It changed the way young people viewed their idols. It changed so much. When the first music video was released, I believe 84, we have video cameras, I could be wrong, sorry, but I believe it was 1984. Everything changed at that moment. But let's take a little step back into history. Let's take the 50s, for example. The 50s was a time of uniformed conformity, down to gender roles, down to home roles. How we looked, how we acted was all in line and the same. The 60s gave birth to rebellion. We rebelled against the war. We all of a sudden started seeing, in America anyway, we started seeing pictures of people in Europe, how they acted, how their culture was like, how they dressed. And this was the first steps of globalization. That's crazy, that all of a sudden we had a new way of thinking in America and we no longer had to conform. Then the 70s showed up and all bets were off. I mean, people had more TV, you were able to go to concerts, people were speaking their mind, people were rebelling. All of a sudden, you didn't have to feel like you were in this box. You can find other people who had the views you had. You could belong to a community. You could show up at a Hendrix concert or a Jim Morrison concert and find people that dressed like you. And you found this community, this love, this identity. The 80s happened, and I mean, MTV, everything. We all of a sudden had a constant feed to those communities. It was no longer maybe if I caught someone on TV. It was no longer maybe if I went to a concert. It was every week. There was a new music video. Every time Madonna released a new video, I knew exactly what she was wearing. I knew how she was acting. I knew how she was moving. I knew how she was talking. I could be her. And I knew that someone across the world also talked, walked, and dressed like that. So I was a part of something now. And that was important. And the 90s, of course, gave us the internet. And yeah, it's all uphill or downhill from there, depending on how you see it. But the thing about it is, in these moments, it gives us this sense of belonging when we can see our identity being molded by the people we look up to. It's all in that I'm finding myself sort of moment. And in that time, you need this sort of self-discovery. It became more important than ever. Feeling like you were part of something became extremely important. But why? Why did fashion have to do with that? What did how I look have to do with me feeling that? Well, one reason, community. Human nature, we group together. We look for like-minded people. We look for people who like the things we like, who look the way we look, who listen to the music we listen to, who understand us. We can date this back to the beginning of history. Let's look at the Vikings, for example, the clans, how you dressed, certain ornaments you had on yourself, certain ways women wore their hair, all depicted where you were from and what group you belonged to, and you were proud of it. It's no different today. Today, we look for the exact same things, whether it be in how we look or the things that we're interested in. It's the same. And this is extremely important in young people. And this is something I really want to touch on, sort of move in that direction, because as a young person, you look for yourself, you look for your community, you look for your belonging, and it's extremely important because of the fact that it's this soul-searching moment, and we don't think that kids are soul-searching. We don't think so. But the thing is, when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, there's so many things going on in your body. Your mind is changing, your chemical imbalances, your hormones are going crazy, your body's changing. You are just all over, everything's out of whack. That is stress. And in those moments, you just want it to stop. You just want to find yourself because you're confused. So you change the way you look, you change the way you act, you find new people, you rebel, you do all these things because you're confused. And the thing is, we need to start the conversation there and give support to outlets to express yourself, to find your identity. Because imagine for a second when you're that age and all those things are going on and you know that who you are right now might dictate who you become in the future. Imagine that pressure. Imagine knowing that as a kid on top of everything else. And we as adults forget that. We forget that. And we discount it because we're busy, we're responsible, and we think that that's stress. It's not. And so we forget that, and we don't give support, and we don't give outlet to young people to express themselves, to express who they are, whether it's visually, internally, whatever it may be. And that's extremely, extremely important. Because that's soul-searching as a young person. And soul-searching, what do you ask yourself when you start doing that, when you start to figure out your identity? What do you ask yourself? You ask, who am I? Now, I understand it does not say that up here. When I first saw this slide, I read, who are you, ? So I started writing about this segment and did a whole thing on it and thought, yeah, this will work, it'll be cool. And then I was like, idiot, it says who you are, period. I can't use that. But wait, actually, I can. It's super profound here. It's profound because it's a statement, not a question. We start to feel as though we need to answer questions all the time and not understand this could be a statement. This could be a dialogue opener. Who you are, not, hey, so who are you? It's, who am I? Let's talk about this. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a dialogue about it instead of feeling as though I have to answer your questions. I have to know who I am right now. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Discuss it as a statement as opposed to a question. Dialogue is extremely, extremely important because for some, finding your identity with fashion or whatever it might be, it's not a case of community. It's not a case of soul searching. It's a case of survival. I want to talk about this because it's important. It's a thing that we need to talk about, and we need to talk about it as identity. I'm going to try not to get emotional here, but I'm going to tell you a story. When I was moving to Seattle from Hawaii, I was 13, I was confused. I was the only brown kid in an all-white high school. I dressed funny. I was from Hawaii, so I spoke differently, and I'm gay. 4 strikes against me. I was alone, absolutely alone. Everything that I had done, how I dressed, everything that empowered me made me feel scared all of a sudden. I didn't have my sister anymore. I was 13, 14 years old. Posters aren't going to tell me that everything is going to be okay. I'm confused. I'm going through puberty. Things are happening in my body. I'm angry. And I want the bullying to stop. I was treated like shit. It was the first time I heard the word faggot. And trust me, it has not been the last. And I thought, how do I make this bullying stop? Change the way you look. So instead of using fashion to celebrate my difference, I used it to hide it. I used it to be something else. So fashion was important in celebrating myself, but it was also important in hiding myself. Now let me be very clear, I do not condone hiding who you are. Always be who you are. Be true to yourself. Absolutely 100% be true to who you are. Always. With that said, what I went through, that was the 90s. Some of you understand that. You went through that in the 80s or the 70s. Today, is it easier? Is it easier for young people today to express themselves in fashion and things of such? Yes and no. I think it's easier to find expression, and that's due to speed of information. Today, nothing has ever been as fast, and nothing will ever be as slow. Think about that for a second. What I want to do is show a little example of how quick things work. Technology or different discoveries reach people at different paces. To reach 50 million users, it took the phone 75 years, the radio 38, TV 13, the internet 4, Facebook 3.5, Pokemon Go 19 days to reach 50 million people. That's a lot of people. Okay. As I said, nothing will ever be as slow. In 20 years' time, that 19 days is going to feel like 75 years. With that, with the speed of information, I no longer have to wait for things. I no longer have to wait for the September issue of Vogue to know what's happening in fall. I no longer have to wait for this old format, it was called video fashion, these VHS tapes to see all the runway shows. I don't have to wait till Rihanna releases her next video to know what she's wearing. Hell, I don't even have to do any research to find out where she ate last night, so I know when I'm in LA, I can go eat there and be cool. Everything is instant. Everything. And that changes the world. Globalization has changed everything. It's changed how we identify with ourselves. It changed how we can identify with other people. I know what my community is wearing across the world. I know what they're listening to. I know that all of a sudden we've changed from this to this in an instant, and I don't have to wait. The entire world's changing and going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So imagine being that kid with all the same things that we talked about a second ago, but now add that to it. That's tough, and we need to continue to have conversations. When people are exposed to so many different influences, so many different fashions, so many different expressions, we need to ask a really important question. Are we more tolerant of it? Of course, I can talk about all the different things that go on in the world, and we want to say, yes, PC, we are more tolerant. You'd be lying. We are not as tolerant as we used to be. The definition of tolerance, I need to read this because I didn't memorize it. Showing the willingness to allow the existence of opinions or behaviors that one does not necessarily agree with. There's a lot of things I don't agree with. There's an orange man sitting in a White House across the Atlantic Ocean I don't agree with. Does that make me a non-tolerant person? By definition, yeah, it does. So we were tolerant for less things in the past, but we were exposed to less things in the past. Now we're exposed to a number of different things. So we need to ask, can we be more tolerant to the new things that we're exposed to? Things that we find offensive, things that we flat out don't agree with, things that are provocative. Can we be more tolerant to those things? We need to learn, and we need to ask ourselves that question. Absolutely ask ourselves that question. I'm going to show you a little example. There's a movie in the 80s. It's called The Breakfast Club. Now, this is perfect. I don't know if everyone's seen it. If you haven't, you have to see it. And it's not because it's such a good movie, it is, but it goes deeper because it is about a group of kids who are at a moment of self-discovery and soul-searching in high school. How they look, how they act, all of that depicts who they are outwardly and how people perceive them. And this is 5 categories, mind you. You have the dropout, the jock, the gothic emotional girl, the brain, the rich cool girl. These are 5 only categories that we've put people into. And it's purely based on the way they dress and the way they look. And this is how people identified. In high school, for us in America in the 80s, you were one of these things, and you had to dress that, and that was it. And that was only 5 categories. Imagine what we see now. There are so many different influences that we see now in fashion, in expressions, in groups, and they change like the wind. So this means I can change like the wind. I can identify differently in 2 seconds if I want to, if it suits me, if it suits you. We need to ask, can we be more tolerant to it? Then and only then are we able to actually give real support and understanding to people who are using things like fashion and expression to find out who they are and to find out a true identity. One of the most influential and amazing people in the world to me is Michelle Obama. She said, "If I can make any impact, I want women to feel good about themselves and have fun with fashion." Of course, she directed this towards women, but I think that she meant this to everyone. Everyone should feel good, and everyone should have fun in fashion. If you know who you are and you understand your identity, you feel good, and have fun with how you express it. Be you, try new things, do things that make you happy. But never, ever, ever judge a book by its cover. Fashion is crucial to finding one's identity and self-expression, but ultimately it's our character and our actions that dictate who we are as people and who we want to be as people.